Hello, you're welcome. In this video, I'm going to be demonstrating the various functions that you can use to round your numbers to decimal places or to integers, depending on what you want during the course of your analysis. So you have several options, and I'm going to be demonstrating a number of them in this video. So the first that we're going to be looking at is the round function. Then we are going to look at the roundup function, the rounddown function, the CEILING.MATH function, the floor.math function, the TRUNC function, and the INT function. So each of these functions assist us with these very tasks of rounding. So either we are rounding to decimal places or we are rounding to integers. So we're going to be starting with the round function. So we have raw value in this B column, and then our A contains the company information. So we are going to be seeing each of these functions, what it does by entering the function. So if I enter round, you see what the round function does. So it rounds a number to a specified number of digits. So depending on the number of digits that we specify in the arguments, we are able to get that return to us. Okay, so in our case, we want two decimal places here. Okay, so I will just enter the number, which is this B, and then number of digits is 2. Okay, so it returns our number to 2 decimal places. So you can see 5.678 is returned as 5.68. So it approximates the second number, the second place, to give us an 8. And now we have 5.68. So we can just copy this down and you can see what we have here. So I can make adjustments to this so as to have all of them with a 0.2 decimals. So now let's round to 0 decimal place using the round function. When we use the round function to round to 0 decimal place, you can see that it approximates to 6 here because this is greater, the 6 here is greater than 5 to give us a 6. Okay, and it does so for the negative values as well. And then here where we have 3, which is less than 5, it approximates to just 5. Since this is not greater than 5, we now have approximation to 5. And even our negative value is still the same. Now, for our round up function, it performs a different kind of analysis from this round. So if we enter round up, you can see what it does here. It rounds a number up away from 0. Okay, so whether the number is a positive number or a negative number, is going to round it up but away from 0. So if we try this our raw value and we want to round to 2 decimal places, remember it rounds it away from 0. So the negative values will be rounded away from 0 and the positive away from 0. So you can see that the same thing takes place here, okay, but it rounds it away from 0, as you can see. So our 5.67 is now 5.68 Okay, so it's taking it far away from 0. And you can see that in the case of this negative number, it goes away from 0, unlike what we have here. Here we have the approximation to 5.67. Okay, but since this is trying to go away from 0, this now becomes 6.8. Okay, so this is the closest away from 0, unlike what we have here. And that is same thing that we see in the 11th row, where we have a negative value. So it rounds this negative value to negative 9.11. Okay, unlike what we have here, negative 9.10. So this one is farther from 0 compared to this, and same as this. Okay, and that's just it about this very function. So when we try it to round to the 0 decimal place, round up. So this is our raw value, and this time to 0. So you also see that this one rounds away from 0, just as we had before. So you can see that our negative value is farther from 0, and even our positive value is farther from 0. Okay, so instead of making this a 5, it takes it farther from 0 to now have a 6. And for the negative values, it's the same thing. Takes it further to have a 6, negative 6. You can see here for our negative 10 is still the same thing. Unlike here where we have a negative 9 when we round to 0 place, here we have a negative 10. Now for our round down, it's different from the round up. Okay, so if we check what it does, you can see that for the round down, it rounds a number down towards 0. So for round up, it goes farther from 0, but for round down, you can see it brings it towards 0. So when we select this raw value as our number, and the number of digits is 2, you notice that here it rounds it down, bringing it closer to 0. So here we have 6.7 instead of 6.8 that we have here when we round or when we round up. Okay, so it brings it closer to 0. So you can see what will also happen for these negative values when we copy down. So it still brings it closer to 0. Now we have a 9.1. Okay, so it brings it closer to 0, as we can see here, unlike the round and the round up. Now for the round down too, we can see what happens when we round to 0 decimal place. This is our raw value to 0. And you can see for all of them, it brings the number closer to 0. So for our negative 5, it brings it closer to 0, as we can see. And for even our positive number, it brings it closer to 0. So having a 5.6 and seeing our 6 here is greater than 5 and should make this a 6 automatically, you can see it's different when we have a round down, because it seeks to round closer to 0. Okay, unlike the normal round function. Now for our ceiling and floor function, we are using decimals to round instead of the integers that we have for the round down, round up, and the round. Okay, so let's see what ceiling does. So for ceiling, you can see it rounds a number up to the nearest integer. So that's one thing that we need to. We first pick up the fact that it rounds a number up. Okay, that's for ceiling. So ceiling is up, floor is down. So it rounds a number up. That's the first thing that we need to pick. And then to the nearest integer, okay, to the nearest integer or to the nearest multiple of significance. So it rounds a number up to the nearest integer or to the nearest multiple of significance. So when we are selecting, we select the number, which is this our raw value, and our significance. In our case, it's a 0.1. Okay, so we are rounding to this very place. That's just equivalent to a 1 decimal. And then enter. So you can see that this actually rounds up. Okay, it rounds up and it approximates. So this one now, which is a 6 having a 7 behind it, now becomes a 7. Okay, now for this 5.6, you can see that for the fact that this is trying to bring us back to closer to 0, we are now having a 5.6 for the negative. So the negative brings us closer to 0 and the positive takes us further from 0. That's one thing about this ceiling function. So you can see the negative now brings us closer to 0. Okay, and the positives take us further from 0, as we can see in each of these. So for the floor, you can see what this does. It rounds a number down. Ceiling rounds up, floor rounds down to the nearest integer or to the nearest multiple of significance. Okay, so the number that we want is this raw value, and then our significance is 0.1. And now you can see that this rounds down. Okay, so for the fact that it's rounding down, our positives come closer to 0, while our negatives go further from 0, as you can see. So this is now 5.6 because it tries to bring the positive values closer to 0, while the negative values are taken further from 0, and that is why we have a 5.7, a negative 5.7 for the negative value. So you can see here, the negative value that we have here is now 9.2. So it takes it further from 0. Okay, but the positive value is brought closer to 0, and that's why we have a 9.9 here. Now for our trunc value, trunc function, it actually returns the integer for us. Okay, so if we do trunc, you can see what it does. It truncates a number to an integer by removing the decimal, okay, or fractional part of the number. So what it does is just to remove the decimal. Okay, so it does not really take into account what is behind. So even if we have a bigger number behind, like a 5 or 6 or more, it does not take that into account. It only focuses on the integer that we have in front. So let's see for this our number. So you can see it just takes out any number that we have after the decimals and not concerned whether the number is greater than 5 or not to perform any approximation. So what if we want to perform approximations for numbers that are greater than 5 so as to be able to round up? In this case, we are going to be using the int function. Okay, it performs the operation of returning the integer just like the trunc, but it takes into account what we have behind the number. So when we enter int, you see it rounds a number down to the nearest integer. Okay, so in our case, this is a 5.67. Remember what the function does. So it rounds it down, okay? So for our negatives now, since it's rounded down, it means it will move further from 0, okay? While for our positive, it returns the exact value we have in front. And that's just it about all these very functions, which can be used to perform different round operations in Excel. And I hope you've been able to find this video helpful. Please, if this video has been helpful, kindly like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.